I've worked security for about 8 years now. Mostly boring gigs. Empty warehouses, small offices, a few overnight shifts at schools during renovation. I like the quiet. And honestly, I prefer working alone. Last summer, I got assigned to a temporary contract at a construction site near Lake Ambrose. It wasn't far from the highway, but it still felt isolated. The company was building some sort of government storage facility. Big fences, cameras, all that. The kind of place where no one tells you what's actually inside. The daytime guard said the job was easy. Check the gates, walk the perimeter twice a night, log vehicle entries. Nothing else ever happened. So when I was offered the overnight shift, I took it without thinking twice. My first few nights were exactly what I expected. I'd bring a thermos of coffee, sit in the small prefab office by the gate, and listen to crickets outside. The only light came from the flood lamps along the perimeter fence. Beyond those lights, it was just trees thick and dark with the lake somewhere past them. The only weird thing was the generator. It was loud, and every now and then the lights would flicker for no reason. I figured it was normal for a temporary setup. Then around my fourth night, things started to get strange. It was close to midnight when I noticed something moving near the far fence line on the west side. I thought maybe a deer or a raccoon had gotten close, so I grabbed my flashlight and went to check it out. When I got there, I didn't see anything, but in the mud near the fence were footprints, not boot prints like you'd expect at a construction site. Bare feet. They looked small, maybe a woman's size, and fresh. I shined my light along the fence to see where they went. They started at the tree line and stopped right at the fence, but there were none going back. I figured maybe someone had wandered too close from the lake, got scared by the lights, and turned around somewhere I couldn't see. I made a note in my log and went back to the office. An hour later, the motion alarm on the camera system beeped. It showed movement in the same area, just static shapes at first, then nothing. I walked the fence again. No one there, no fresh prints. By 3 a.m., I was ready to call it a night. I locked the gate and did one last round with my flashlight. When I got near the west side again, I noticed something odd. One of the floodlights was still flickering, even though the generator sounded fine. The bulb wasn't burnt out. It looked like it was struggling to stay lit. I was staring at it when I heard something from the trees. It was a woman's voice. Not a scream, not a word, just a soft hum, like someone singing under their breath. It stopped the second I moved my light toward the sound. The forest went dead silent. Even the crickets stopped. I stood there for a long minute, then decided I'd had enough exploring for one night. I went back, locked the door, and sat with my coffee, watching the monitors until sunrise. When the morning shift arrived, I mentioned it casually to one of the other guards. He gave me this look, half serious, half amused, and said, "You heard her already?" I laughed it off. "Heard who?" He didn't answer right away. Then he said, "Don't worry about it, you'll get used to the place." That stuck with me all day. The next night I came prepared. I brought my own small spotlight and decided to record my patrols on my phone. If there was someone sneaking in or messing around, I wanted proof. Everything was fine until around 2:15 a.m. I was sitting by the gate when the lights on the monitor blinked again. This time it wasn't the west fence. It was near the unfinished building, the one with the concrete foundation still curing. I grabbed my flashlight and started toward it. When I got there, I saw something that made my stomach drop. On the wet cement, near the center of the slab, were footprints again. Bare, human footprints, walking straight across the surface. But the slab had been poured 2 days earlier. There was no way anyone could walk on it without sinking deep, yet the prints were perfectly formed, as if pressed in when it was still soft. I ran my light over them, half expecting to see movement. The air smelled strange, like metal and lake water. And then I heard it again, the humming. Closer this time. It came from inside the unfinished structure, from the shadows under the steel beams. I froze. Every instinct told me to walk away, but I called out anyway. "Hello? You can't be in here." No answer. Just a quiet, drawn-out breath that didn't sound right. Too long, too wet, too heavy. I stepped backward, keeping my light steady. For a second, the beam caught something pale between two beams. Something that looked like a face, but it wasn't quite right. The eyes were too far apart. I didn't wait to see more. I backed away until I was in the open, then turned and walked as calmly as I could back to the gatehouse. I locked the door, shut off the interior light, and sat there shaking until morning. The next day, I went to my supervisor and told him I wanted off that site. I didn't care if I lost the shift differential. I just didn't want to go back there at night. He didn't even ask for details. He just nodded slowly and said, "Most people don't last more than a week there." That was the end of it. A few months later, I ran into another guard who'd taken over the overnight shift. We got to talking and he mentioned the Lake Ambrose job. He said he'd quit after 2 nights. I asked why. He told me the same thing. Lights flickering, strange noises, footprints. But he also said something else, something I still think about. He said that one night, just before dawn, he saw a woman standing outside the fence looking in at him. Long hair, white shirt, bare feet. He ran to the gate, but by the time he got there, she was gone. The next morning, they found more prints by the lake. The security logs said the same thing mine did. Motion alerts with no subject on camera. I don't know what's out there near that construction site, and I don't care to find out. All I know is that every time I drive past Lake Ambrose on the highway now, I look the other way. Because even from the road, you can see that building standing there, lights still flickering. This happened the summer after I graduated college. I was 22, living back home for a few months before moving out of state for a job. It was one of those humid nights in late July where the air feels thick and the sky stays a weird, dark orange even after midnight. A few friends and I had spent the evening at a bonfire near the coast. Nothing wild, just music, cheap beer, and people trying to hold on to the last pieces of summer before real life started. I left around 1:30 a.m. Everyone else was crashing there, but I had promised my mom I'd be home. The drive was about an hour and a half, most of it through empty country roads. I remember checking Google Maps and noticing a shortcut that could save me 15 minutes. It cut through a series of back roads that eventually joined the main highway near my town. I'd never taken that route before, but it looked straightforward. The first few miles were fine, narrow, quiet, the occasional porch light glowing through the trees. But after a while, the houses disappeared, replaced by thick woods on both sides. I rolled the windows down to fight the fog that kept forming on the windshield. That's when I saw her. At first, I thought it was an animal in the road, something white catching my headlights. But when I slowed down, I realized it was a woman. She was standing on the shoulder, barefoot, wearing what looked like a thin nightgown. Her hair was soaked, hanging over her face. She wasn't waving or moving, just standing there, looking at the ground. I stopped a few yards away and rolled my window down halfway. "Hey, you okay?" She didn't answer. Something in me said to drive away. Every horror movie I'd ever seen was flashing through my head. But she looked so out of place, lost, vulnerable. Against my better judgment, I put the car in park, turned on my hazard lights, and stepped out. The air smelled like rain and dirt. "Ma'am," I said, walking closer. "Do you need help? Are you hurt?" She lifted her head slowly. Her eyes caught the headlights and pale and glassy. She looked about my age, maybe younger. Her voice was barely a whisper. "Can you take me home?" I hesitated, but she looked so desperate that I couldn't just leave her there. I unlocked the passenger door and told her to get in. She moved strangely, like her limbs didn't bend right. When she sat down, the seat creaked under her wet clothes. I tried to stay calm. "Where do you live?" She pointed straight ahead. "Just keep driving." So I did. For the next 10 minutes, the only sound was the hum of the tires and the faint dripping of water from her clothes onto the floor mat. I glanced at her a few times, but she was staring out the window, her face turned away from the light. "Were you in an accident or something?" I asked. "There's no houses for miles." She didn't respond. I turned the radio on low just to fill the silence. The signal kept cutting out, fading to static, then coming back with half a song. After a few minutes, she said quietly, "It's this turn." I slowed down. A dirt path split off from the main road, almost hidden by the trees. There were no street signs, no lights, just darkness. "Are you sure?" I asked. She nodded. Against every instinct I had, I turned onto the path. The gravel crunched under the tires. The forest on both sides seemed to close in, branches brushing the roof. After maybe half a mile, the headlights caught a small clearing, and what looked like the remains of an old farmhouse. The roof had partially collapsed, the windows shattered, weeds growing through the front steps. My stomach sank. "Is this your place?" She smiled faintly, the first expression I'd seen on her face. "We're here." Then she opened the door and stepped out before I could stop her. "Wait!" I called, jumping out after her. "You can't just—" She was already walking toward the house, barefoot in the dirt. I started to follow but stopped dead when I realized something. The ground where she had been walking was dry. No footprints, no impressions in the mud. That's when I noticed the air had gone completely still. Not a sound, no wind, no insects, nothing. A sudden chill ran through me. I looked back toward the house and she was gone. Not inside, not anywhere. Just gone. I bolted back to the car, slammed the door, and threw it in reverse. The tires spun on the gravel before catching. I didn't even care which direction I was going. I just wanted out. After a few minutes, I found the main road again and stopped to breathe. My hands were shaking so bad I could barely hold the wheel. When I finally calmed down enough to drive, I realized something that made my heart drop. The passenger seat was dry, no water, no dirt. No sign that anyone had been sitting there. But on the dashboard, stuck under the edge of the glove compartment, was a single long strand of hair, wet, black, and tangled. I told my mom what happened the next morning. She didn't believe the ghost part, obviously, but she did get quiet when I described the dirt road. She told me that years ago, before I was born, there had been a house out that way, a small family place near a creek that had flooded one summer. The youngest daughter drowned. Her body was never recovered. I didn't go back to check if that was the same house. A week later, I tried finding that shortcut on Google Maps again just to see if I could make sense of it. But it wasn't there. The route ID taken, the one that led to the dirt road, didn't exist anymore. I still drive those back roads sometimes when I visit home. Every once in a while, I'll catch myself checking the shoulder out of habit, half expecting to see her standing there again. I don't know if she was real, or if something wanted me to see her, but I do know one thing. If you ever find yourself driving a quiet back road on a summer night and you see someone standing by the trees, keep going, because some rides aren't meant to be given. This happened in the summer of 2019. I haven't told many people about it because no one really believes me when I do. 3 of my friends and I decided to go camping for a weekend before one of us moved out of state. We picked a place called Mill Creek Campground, about 2 hours north of where we lived. It was quiet, cheap, and far enough from the city that you could actually see the stars. We packed the usual stuff: tents, sleeping bags, a cooler full of cheap beer, and a small Bluetooth speaker. The plan was simple: drive up Saturday morning, spend the night, come back Sunday afternoon. When we got there were only a few other campers, an older couple with a trailer near the entrance and a family with kids somewhere deeper in the woods. We picked a spot close to the creek, set up our tents, and built a fire before it got dark. The first few hours were perfect. We grilled hot dogs, played music, drank a little too much, and talked about stupid high school memories. The air smelled like pine and smoke. It felt good to just be out there, away from everything. Around midnight, the fire started dying down, and the woods got a lot darker than any of us expected. The family that had been camping nearby had turned off their lanterns, and the only light came from the faint glow of our coals. I remember leaning back in my chair and realizing just how quiet it was. No cars, no wind, just the steady trickle of water from the creek. Then we heard a whistle. It was faint, coming from somewhere past the trees behind us. Just 2 short notes, the kind of tune people use to get attention. We all froze for a second, listening. Eli, the loudest of the group, laughed and said, "Probably another camper messing around." But there hadn't been any flashlights or movement from that direction all night. We waited a bit, shrugged it off, and went back to talking. A few minutes later, it happened again. 2 short notes, the same pitch, a little closer this time. Okay, I said. That's weird. Eli called out, "Hey, you good out there?" No response. The third whistle came from the opposite side of the creek. That's when we realized whoever it was, there were at least two of them. Or something was moving way faster than it should have been. We turned our flashlights on and pointed them toward the trees. Nothing. Just darkness and fog starting to roll in over the creek. "Let's just go to bed," I said. "It's probably some kids screwing around." Everyone agreed, though none of us looked relaxed. We put out the fire completely, crawled into our tents, and zipped them up. I shared my tent with my friend Josh. We were both lying there listening. After about 20 minutes, I started to drift off when I heard footsteps outside. Not twigs snapping randomly, actual slow footsteps circling the tent. Josh whispered, "You hear that?" I nodded, though he couldn't see me. We stayed perfectly still. The steps stopped right next to my side of the tent. I could see the faint shadow of someone's legs through the thin fabric just standing there. Then came the whistle again, but this time, it was so close that the tent fabric vibrated from the sound. I nearly yelled, but Josh grabbed my arm and whispered, "Don't move." Whoever it was stood there for a few seconds, then walked off. We could hear the crunch of their boots fading toward the creek. I don't think either of us slept after that. At sunrise, we got out and checked around. There were footprints, clear ones, all around both our tents. They weren't boot prints, though. They looked wrong. The toes were long, spread apart, almost like a handprint but facing the wrong way. Eli came out of his tent pale as hell and said he'd heard something too, like breathing near his head in the middle of the night. We agreed to pack up early, but before we left, I decided to take one last look near the creek, just to prove to myself it was some prankster. The fog was thick, but I could see where the footprints led. They went down the bank, across the shallow water and into the trees on the other side. Except, halfway across, the prints stopped. Not like they turned or disappeared into the grass. They just ended, in the middle of the creek. The water was calm, maybe 6 inches deep. There was nowhere to step after that without making a splash. I stood there staring at the last footprint for a while before I noticed something else. In the mud right next to it, written with a finger or something sharp, was a single word: "Stay." That's when I heard the whistle again. Faint, from somewhere deep in the trees across the creek. I ran back to camp and we left within minutes. On the way home, we stopped at a diner off the highway. While we were eating, the waitress noticed our camping gear and asked which site we'd been at. When I told her Mill Creek, she frowned. "That place," she said. "They shut that down years ago. Flooding washed out half the trail. You sure you were at the right spot?" I told her there were other campers there, people with tents. She just shook her head. "Honey, no one camps out there anymore." I drove back by that area a few months later out of curiosity. The entrance road was gated off with a rusted closed sign hanging sideways. No campers. No signs anyone had been there for years. I stopped for maybe 30 seconds, staring at the overgrown path before pulling away. As I got back on the highway, my phone pinged, a random audio message like static. I played it. 2 short notes. A whistle. The same sound from that night. I deleted it immediately, and I've never gone camping again.